Hello, everyone, and welcome to Week 7 of the OSU Preview Podcast. I'm Alex Dusky, and I'm joined in the podcast booth by Jace Andrews and Asa Lucas. Guys, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and the best thing is I have three things I love in life, and it's Asa Lucas, mac and cheese, and college football, and I get all those things this week, so we're doing great.
All right, I'll just leave the podcast then. You guys are not important. Asa, how are you doing today?
I'm also doing great. You know, when you have the opportunity to work with Jace Andrews, we've worked exclusively together in the past, and to be able to have this podcast with him is phenomenal. And then Ms. Alex Dusky is just like sprinkles on an ice cream.
Thank you. So let's start off by talking about last week's Cowboy football win over Texas Tech. They won 41-31. And Asa, I have to give it to you again with the score predictions. I was off by 9. Jace was off by 10. Asa predicted 41-27, so you were only off by 4 points. Asa, how do you do it?
It's very hard when you have my knowledge and ability of Cowboy football. Notice how I said Cowboy football and not Big 12, because we'll get into that later. But, Alex, when you study the game long enough and you have such a high football IQ, it all starts to come together. You start seeing numbers in the air, and it all starts to make sense.
I will say I am very impressed, but I am coming for that title this week. I think I have a very good score.
Okay. Before we get into some analysis, I did want to say the Texas Tech game and the Arkansas Pine Bluff game was a sold-out game. 55,509. That was the record attendance on the stat sheets. Now, Jace, I think you know this answer, so Ace, this is to you.
Yeah.
Do you know what the attendance recorded at Bedlam last year was?
I think with the construction they made, I'm going to dip into 56,000.
54,990. So there were less people at Bedlam last year by 600 than these last two home games for OSU.
That's crazy. I think part of that, too, though, is we are starting to feel, especially me coming into campus this year, I felt we are in a post-COVID world. It's a really nice feeling.
That's true.
It feels like our freshman year again, where you don't see masks, people talk about COVID, but not as much, and I think everyone's starting to feel that now.
Looking at the Cowboys football's performance, in my opinion, it kind of felt like the 2020 season, and the defense kicked in and the offense finally followed, but I warned you guys, I thought that it was going to have a cardiac Cowboys game, and in my opinion, it was. On the offense, my opinion, nothing particularly amazing, nothing particularly bad. Sanders did pass Gundy in career completions. He's now third all-time. He's also third for all-time touchdowns. He passed Brandon Weeden. One good stat is that through the first 5 games this season, the team has scored 16 touchdowns on drives lasting less than 2 minutes, and last season we had 17 of those quick drives total. Jace, what were your thoughts on the Cowboys' offense?
I can agree with most of what you said. I think there's not really anything great to look at, but I will say Bryson Green is an absolute monster. 5 receptions, 115 yards, 1 touchdown. He looked like a wide receiver 1, which is funny because we thought Quentin Johnson was going to be the number 1 wide receiver.
Was he hurt this last
game? So
game?
he got a concussion in the first minute of the game, basically. I, myself, did not see the play. He never had a target, never had a catch. So what my opinion is, he probably got hit on a block, came out, and went into concussion protocol, and after that, you're pretty much done. Which brings up an interesting question to if we'll see him this weekend.
Asa?
I was just going to say, Jace, you stole my biggest takeaway from the Cowboy offense was Bryson Green. He had a phenomenal performance, and he really stood out to me. 5 reception, 115 yards, 1 touchdown. He looked like that wide receiver 1, and there was no doubt about that.
Well, and the funny thing is the past 2 weeks he's been making – I know maybe younger kids would not – well, they will. An OBJ-like catch. He's been making lots of very Odell Beckham-like catches.
Who doesn't know who OBJ is?
Well, that's what I'm thinking. But, I mean, there's some
We're
kids
not
out there.
that old, Jace.
I mean, I understand, but, he's out of the league right now. So, but anyway, he's making some spectacular catches because, I will say people are now calling them George Pickens catches, which is incorrect.
That's interesting.
Moving on to the Cowboy defense.
Oh.
The first half was terrible. The Red Raiders had 62 plays. We allowed 347 total yards and 24 points in the first half. But thankfully, we were able to hold the Red Raiders to only 180 yards and one touchdown in the second half. We also held them scoreless on their final 6 drives. That included 3 turnovers on down and an interception by Mason Cobb. Looking at the defense from afar, we have 51 total tackles for loss this season. Last year at this point, only 39. So we're definitely getting those more tackles for loss. But I think we're still kind of a little rocky when we start games. Asa, I can see the look on your face. What are your thoughts?
This time I knew I really wanted to prepare well for Ms. Dusky. She expects perfection from us, Jace. I don't know if you disagree.
No, I agree.
And to make this show as informative possible, I was really looking into this defensively because I had the opportunity to practice some play-by-play over this game. And the defense was it was ugly to call, really. Even when you're saying there's more tackles this year at this point than there was last year when it comes to tackles for losses, what I found was, do you know what our defensive unit is ranked in total defense in the country?
I think it's still like top 10, isn't it?
No, we're like in the 50s.
104. We are 104, even though we're only giving up 24.8 points per game.
It's those yards.
It's a problem. Even with all the tackles we're getting, we're still allowing so many yards, and teams are
and missed tackles.
Do whatever they want. Yep.
Like the holes that that the running backs can just run right through, or the missed tackles. We have 59? Did I say 51? What if we would? We could probably have 70 at this point if it wasn't for those missed tackles and missed opportunities from our defense.
To play devil's advocate, they have been somewhat doing like some nice things in terms of getting in the backfield. They had 4 sacks this last game, 12 QB hurries. And with a redshirt freshman quarterback, that's what you want to do because you got to kind of bounce them out of there.
You bring up a good point. We didn't mention this. Donovan Smith for the Red Raiders did not play. We faced...
He had one play where
I was about to say,
he
had one pass, and they didn't. But playing devil's advocate, Oklahoma State has been really good with some worse defenses than what we've had currently. If you go back a couple of years, 2017, our defense was not good. We were really, really good that year, though. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, yes, is the defense underperforming from what we thought and what we expected? Yes, but also, did we just have one of the best defensive seasons in Oklahoma State history? Also, yes.
Okay,
so
but
I think anything was going to be an understatement from last year. I get the concern, and I agree, but I think the problem is giving up so many yards to these guys who we never hear of until they actually play us and all of a sudden 200 yards.
This is my thing. You can have a so-so defense if your offense is amazing and your offense can win you the games. That's why last year people said because our defense was amazing, the defense won us those games. And right now, I kind of feel like it's not impressively amazing one way or the other.
See, I would disagree. I think our offense is, when it comes to push and shove, top 2 in the Big 12. With Quinn Ewers with Texas, and in the nation, I think we're probably top 25.
All right, here we go. I got some offensive stats.
Okay,
as well. I prepared for both sides of the ball. So we are 4th in FBS scoring at 45.2 per game, and then our passing game is at number 17 in the country. So overall, we're 21 in total offense. So it is a good offense.
It's better, yeah.
It's a good offensive game plan what we have, but when you're playing teams like TCU. Or when we get to Texas, are we going to be able to outscore them? Because our defense won't come in.
We will get to that later on. But
that's kind of thing is Texas is the one that worries me.
Well, that's not the theme of today's episode. It's the Horned Frogs today.
Which we should be a little nervous for.
Y'all seen the Horned Frogs hand symbol, right?
It's like a little peace sign.
No,
like
it's
a bunny
a bunny.
ear.
It's a bunny.
There is one special person on Oklahoma State's football that I have to give a shout out, and it is to redshirt junior DeMarco Jones. He's out of Booker T High School in Tulsa. Do you know why I say that?
Oh, I know why.
He called for the fair catch on the onside kick and arguably could have saved us the game. And everyone's talking about him. National news. Who knew you could call for a fair catch on onside kicks? Does that name sound familiar at all?
Not to me, but I'm sorry to say
He recovered the muffed punt on OU's 5-yard line, leading to a touchdown in Bedlam last year.
Okay.
So while we may not say DeMarco Jones' name frequently, the 2 times that we've said it, big special teams guy.
Yeah, I don't know who taught him that. I didn't even know that rule, to be honest. Like, obviously, when you pop the ball up, you have the chance to catch it. But it's one thing to teach a 18 to 22-year-old that. It's another thing to do it in-game in a scenario where they literally just scored a touchdown on the opening drive, and they do it right away. Like, that if they get that and score, that's a 14-0 lead. You haven't even touched the ball. So a great play by him, and I mean, he shocked me. I didn't even know that rule.
When I was calling it, I was confused. I was trying to explain the situation, and I was like, I believe Texas Tech recovered. And I was like, wait a minute, referees are deliberating. And until it was explained, I didn't know either. I never knew that rule existed.
I will say, I do think by the end of the year that rule will be out, just like how Kenny Pickett's fake slide was taken out.
It should be. It should be.
That shouldn't be a thing. I got to be honest. Like, that's not really fair.
Well, what it is, it's that if the ball for the onside kick rolls, you can't do that. It's only if the ball somehow magically tips up into the air after hitting the ground, bounces up, and then he can fair catch it. That's what it is.
A lot of onside kicks can do that.
A lot of successful onside kicks do that.
Correct. So it's like, how are they going to keep, to raise their hand? So.
Any other last-minute thoughts before we move on to the Big 12?
Spencer Sanders' Heisman campaign is looking less and less appealing, but I'm sure we'll talk about Spencer when we get into our next segment.
All right, looking at the Big 12, Jace, gotta hand it to you. You went 3-0 in your Big 12 predictions last week. Asa 2-1. I went 1-2. So Jace has now taken the lead current standings. You're the only winning record with a record of 8-7. Asa, you're 7-8, and I am 6-9. So disclaimer before we continue, we are filming this show earlier on in the week, and Big 12 fans know that Baylor and West Virginia are played Thursday night, so we're filming that pre the Baylor game. We cannot give you feedback on what our thoughts on that performance is. So instead, I thought it'd be fun if we just gave a quick little score prediction, and you, the viewers, can tell us who was right. Asa?
You ready for the biggest upset in the history of the Big 12?
No.
Because it's not this game.
Oh.
I was about to say, JT Daniels going to come out and play?
No, I have Baylor winning this one. Their offense has not been the most appealing in the world to me, so I have Baylor winning this one 31-17.
Baylor always seems to do well after a loss, and including with the bye week. I'm going to say they win 41-17. In Morgantown, it is hard, so that may come back to bite both of us. But I just don't see anything good in that West Virginia offense.
I have a big win, but a lower score. I have 35-10.
Okay.
So, fans, you'll have to let us know how that game went.
Yeah,
We'll talk about it next week. Looking at last week's Big 12, the poor Kansas Jayhawks. They lost on a last-minute touchdown pass. Final score was 38-31. Jalen Daniels, quarterback, went out before halftime. Jason Bean thankfully kept them in the game. They didn't drop out of the rankings. They stayed ranked at 19th, which I think is a big win for them. And something happened on social media. A reporter tweeted out that Jalen Daniels will be missing the rest of the season with a level 3 tear in his shoulder.
Correct.
And then Jalen Daniels responded saying, well, that's news to me.
And then Lance Leipold tweeted out last night, said, guess who showed up in my office? And it was Jalen Daniels looking perfectly fine. Hands raised, shoulder in the air, which if you tear your shoulder like that, you won't be able to do that right away.
So some mysterious things happen in Lawrence.
And this could affect the Big 12 in a dramatic way if Jalen Daniels is not hurt.
Well, I have to hand it to Jason Bean. I mean, he kept the Jayhawks in the game. The first drive that he came in, they scored on a touchdown.
Well, and forgive me if I'm wrong, I think he was the third or first highest. He was the first or third highest ranked quarterback according to PFF.
He was the
this past week.
highest ranked quarterback since 2015.
Yeah, he had an amazing game coming in relief. So they're not. I said this a couple days ago in the Big 12 report. I know it's Saturday now when you're listening to this, so if you've watched the Poke Report, you know what I'm about to say. But with or without Jalen Daniels, Kansas is going to be fine.
I think so. I think so as well.
You're a brave soul for believing that.
But do you know who's not fine?
Oklahoma.
Our friends down in Norman lost 49-0 at the Red River rivalry game. Dun dun dun.
I have never felt so much joy since.
I don't know if you saw it, Asa. I showed Jace earlier this morning, but one of the Texas players posted with a photo of all of him and his fellow Longhorn friends and said, "Call us the 49ers because we 49'd them Sooners."
Yeah. That's great. That's great. Good.
So it sets up a big, kind of interesting game. The Jayhawks are traveling down to Norman. OU, who's 0-3 in the conference. Kansas coming off their first conference loss. Asa, who we have winning this game?
This will be interesting to people. This will be interesting. But I think Dylan Gabriel is going to start, and because of that, I have Oklahoma winning.
What's your score?
Man, you're very specific about the scores this week.
I know.
I feel really tested. I have Oklahoma winning 38-34.
Okay. I'm just going to ask for scores on this game. We'll just leave it as wins for the next one.
Okay.
Jace?
I think it's more like 0-4. They're going to lose Kansas. No offense. Actually, offense. I'm an Oklahoma State reporter, right? I can say this. They're not good at all. Like, nothing about them is good. Nothing looked good in that game. Their defense was bad. Their receivers did nothing. Even Marvin Mims. I mean, he's one of the best receivers in college football. He couldn't do anything. Now, I know Texas' defense is pretty good, but even if Dylan Gabriel comes back and Jalen Daniels cannot play in this game, Jason Bean, like I said, is good. And the Kansas defense,
Pretty impressive.
they held TCU better than Oklahoma did. So I know it's
What's
in
your-
Norman, but to me, they've already checked out.
Score?
Oh, sorry. 34-28. I will say it is going to be a touchdown. So
Well, I have a very similar score to you. I also have the Jayhawks winning. Mine's closer, though. I have a 31-28. And I can't tell if it's going to be Kansas is up, 31-21 and OU gets a last-minute touchdown, or if they're tied and Kansas gets a last-minute field goal.
This is the game I need so I can climb back into
I will
this.
I will say, as much as I want it to be like Kansas runs over them, I think it would be hysterical if OU just got out to this 28-10 lead
and
and
blew
then
it.
didn't
Yeah.
score again.
Choked. Oh, that would be great.
The next Big 12 game matchup we're going to talk about is Iowa State at Texas. Texas is obviously coming off of a dominant win. Iowa State coming off of a very mediocre performance.
10-9.
Yes, lost to Kansas State at home, 10-9. One offensive touchdown, one touchdown period in that entire game. When I was prepping for the podcast, I saw on ESPN tickets as low as $2 for this game.
$2?
So,
What the heck?
Jace, what are your thoughts on this?
Texas
State.
wins. Ewers is scary. I am scared. And end of story.
I feel very confident that Iowa State's going to score more than 9
Yes,
9
I
points.
do agree with that.
In this game, the Texas defense is good, but they're not intimidating. I have Texas winning this one. They're going to get a revenge game for what Iowa State did last year. I remember watching that one. They absolutely humiliated Texas. Texas is going to win this one 31-10.
That game,
Sorry, 31-13.
That game was very memorable.
I
will say that.
have Texas winning by 2 scores as well. I don't have the exact numbers, but I think it'll
Oh,
be-
you don't have the exact score?
No, I said just the numbers for Kansas, okay?
Okay.
Any other Big 12 takeaways before we dive into Cowboys game and TCU?
It's a segue into that, but the next 2 weeks for the Cowboys are going to
It's a
be our
gauntlet.
season
It's a gauntlet.
in a way.
Absolutely. No, you're not wrong, but don't forget Norman. It doesn't matter what your record is. Even with what Texas did, Spencer Sanders is not Quinn Ewers, and Texas
right, he's better.
and Texas had such a massive chip on their shoulder. 5 straight losses to Oklahoma, and that game means so much. And so does Bedlam, but Texas had more to lose than Oklahoma did to gain.
Yeah.
Did you
Well,
hear
that
what
sounds like something that I said last week on the Poke Report, and you said, no, I think OU needs to win this game.
I said they need to, but who predicted correctly on that one? Oh, on the
Me.
Poke Report.
Yeah, on the
Oh,
Poke
Poke
Report, yeah.
Did you hear what I just said? I can't go back on it. OU's bad. So.
All right, looking at our Cowboys, they're traveling down to Fort Worth, Texas to take on the TCU Horned Frogs. OSU did move down to 8. We've just kind of been flip-flopping between 7 and 8. TCU moved up to 13. OSU leads this series all time, 17-13-2, but TCU does lead at home, 8-5-2. Jace, I'm going to let you start talking about the offense. Looking at stats, Max Duggan and Spencer Sanders are very similar statistically.
Yeah, I talked about this in the Poke Report, if you watched that, but just under 1,400 yards for Sanders, 1,305 for Duggan, 12 touchdowns for Sanders, 14 touchdowns for Duggan, and then just 3 interceptions combined, 2 of those coming from Spencer. But I will say the big difference is the completion percentage. Duggan completes 73% of his passes, while Spencer is 63%. Now, a lot of that comes from this last game where he went 22 for 45, which hurt a lot. But I think it's going to be interesting because in this game, Spencer's going to have to make smart decisions about when he wants to actually throw the ball or when he wants to run. And I think this game, if there's a game for Spencer to go off rushing, I think it's this
Well,
one.
another thing, before Asa, you give your analysis, is that Max has 204 rushing yards. He's the second leading rusher for TCU.
Correct, which is funny, though, because he has 3 touchdowns rushing, and Spencer has 50 more yards than him, but he has 6.
Mm-hmm.
So a little extra there, which is how they're used differently.
Okay, Asa, what are your thoughts?
So TCU's best shot at beating us is going to be through the name of Quentin Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
So Quentin
I have him
Johnson
written
last
down.
week had 14 receptions, 206 yards. A phenomenal game. He's been doing a really good job. And I worry about our secondary.
Mm-hmm.
And we did have that corner, Jabbar Muhammad.
Mm-hmm. Where he
And-
shakes his finger.
And he did a great job covering. I don't think it was Xavier White. I don't remember exactly who was covering for Texas Tech, but he had a good lockdown defense on him, some great man-to-man coverage. However, Texas Tech doesn't have a receiver like Quentin Johnson. And then Max Duggan is doing such a great job right now. It really scares me. Our saving grace, though, for TCU is their defense is ranked 110 in the nation.
Something before we move on to defense, I haven't, watched TCU. I can't say, oh, this is a player whose the stats don't show it. But just looking statistically, they have 1 key running back in Kendra Miller and 1 key receiver in Quentin Johnson, which I think is where the Cowboys have the edge because, as we've said, there isn't really a number 1 receiver. There isn't really a number 1 running back. When we are
Definitely
kind of
not a
seeing,
number 1 running
we're
back.
kind of seeing, Bryson Green and maybe even Dominic Richardson kind of rising to the top, but it's still pretty even keeled. Where I think Duggan's going to rely on these 2 offensive players to get the scores and get the ball on the field.
Well, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. So you mentioned not watching and seeing a player whose stats maybe haven't revealed it. It's Gunnar Henderson. He's played very well for TCU. He had a 70-yard touchdown in the game against OU, and Duggan's going to have to look to him for the backup option to Quentin Johnston because ultimately, I guarantee you, Jabbar, who you just mentioned, who was the unsung hero of last week's game, we didn't mention him a lot, but he was the unsung hero, played very well.
Asa, I don't know if you could see what he was doing on the field, but anytime he would get a tackle or, block a pass, he would go up and wave his finger in the guy's face and wave it to the OSU sidelines. So the student section started waving their fingers, and it was just kind of funny, adding a little excitement for him.
Yeah, because it's funny because usually you go, the 2 hands incomplete. He was saying, no, this is my field. That was very funny. One thing, as we transition into the defense, Kendall Daniels will be out for the first half because of the targeting from last game. It's something important to watch. I don't think it'll be that big because, like I said, Jabbar will probably be on Quentin Johnston, but that leaves Corey Black, Thomas Harper, and a couple of the other guys to kind of look at him. So
the other thing is, with how the Cowboys' defense has been, the first half of games hasn't really been that impressive. So maybe he's not going to be missing that much, and then the second half, it'll be a great asset back.
Both of these teams are very similar. They don't have strong defenses, but they have mobile quarterbacks. They have receivers that can catch. And the running game, little bit different, but Dominic Richardson doesn't impress me. In that game against Texas Tech, I watched his performance, and I was like, oh, you were doing the hard runs. You were getting those 2 to 3 yard carries on first down to help set up a 2nd down and 7, but nothing about his performance really impressed me.
I will say 2 things or a couple things about that last game before we kind of finish up here. Dominic does not impress me, just like you said. I want to see Jade more. We didn't really see him at all. We just haven't seen him in the past 2 weeks.
True.
He had that kickoff return, but he had no carries in the Baylor game. So I want to see him more. He's got the speed. I think he should be played and used more. And then another thing, I wasn't a big fan of the play calling last week. I'm not going to say I was loving that at all. I don't think it was terrible, but I don't think I was loving it. And then just so we mentioned him, Tanner Brown was the special teams player of the week.
He
right?
was,
right.
yes.
Special teams player of the week, Tanner Brown. So big shout out to him.
One thing looking at the defenses, again, they're pretty evenly matched on passes deflected, but OSU is stronger on tackles for loss, and sacks. I do think the team needs to look out for safety Mark Perry. He is leading the TCU in tackles this season.
And I think the one thing that people are looking at, like, oh, TCU's this scary team, but I know Kansas is good. Looking back on that OU game, it's not as impressive anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is going to be an interesting game. To me, it's hard because every game in the Big 12 this year is going to be interesting because we don't know what's going to happen. Everything is up in the air, and so that's why it's fun to watch college football, but it's also why it's stressful.
Jace, I will let you start off with our predictions. Before you do that, TCU has a 57.6% chance to win. The over-under is 68.5, and TCU is favored by 3.5.
I will say, usually you get 3 points for being at home. So if they were here, we would get 3 points and we'd probably be favored by it. So just so people don't get worried, I think if that's a neutral side, it's an even line. Score prediction though, high scoring game.
Yep.
OSU 49, TCU 44. Defenses don't come out to play, but OSU gets the stop that TCU got this week against Kansas.
Asa?
Very similar score prediction. I also have a very high-scoring game considering the weaknesses of both teams' defenses. I have Oklahoma State winning 45, TCU 42.
Oh,
and I think both teams are going to come out scoring very highly in the first half. Just like Texas Tech, it'll be that kind of format. Then in the third quarter, adjustments are going to be made. Cowboys are going to keep striking, though, and it'll come down to Max Duggan, either fumble or interception on the last drive.
I have a lower score and pretty similar win margin. The Cowboys winning 35-31. I don't know. I think, we said last week is kind of where we're going to judge the Cowboys. That's kind of how we'll see how we are. And I think this week even more so because, we struggled against an unranked Texas Tech team at home. How are we going to do against a ranked team on the road? So I think there's a lot in the air. I feel confident in our Cowboys that they will pull out the win, but I think it'll kind of come down to the wire.
Texas Tech, if they were in a different conference, I would argue could be ranked because they would have more wins. They started out the season playing 6 ranked teams, and that takes a lot out of a team. So for them to come in there and play like that, I'm not too surprised. So I think that is one saving grace in terms of, they didn't play the best. Because apparently to a lot of people, winning by 10 is a close game now.
And I think we're seeing a Big 12 championship preview in a way. I see. Mm-hmm. I don't think Kansas State is going to be able to hold on to this momentum in a high-scoring Big 12 this year.
No, Adrian Martinez he just can't score that much.
All right, well, that is it for the OSU Preview podcast. The Cowboys will take the field at 2:30 today in Fort Worth to go turn your TVs to ABC. Make sure to check out the Poke Report on YouTube as well. You can see all 3 of our smiling faces talking some more about OSU athletics. I'm Alex Dusky, joined by Jace Andrews and Asa Lucas. And as always,
go Pokes!